Whether you have a switch that's broken or you realized that you replaced all of the switches in your house except for the two in the laundry room, that's what I'm gonna show you how to do today. I'm gonna show you how to replace a light switch. First thing you need to do is turn off the power. Right now, you can see I got power. So we're gonna turn off the breaker. I'm pretty sure I know which one it is, but if you aren't sure which breaker this is on, go out to your breaker box, have a friend or your significant other in the house and put them on the phone, and when the light goes off, they say, hey, it went off, and then you know what breaker you're on. So let me go turn it off first. That was not it. I found it. Tools that you're gonna need for this are a pair of wire strippers, a flathead screwdriver, and a Phillips head screwdriver. So first, let's take off the old wall plate. These old wall plates had very long screws. You can tell this hasn't been off in a long time. If ever since I've moved here, good Lord. There we go. All right, here's your switches. We're gonna pull them out. It's these screws here on the top and bottom. These ones might be a bit of a pain to get out. Depends on how old your house is. My house is about 43, 44 years old. And these switches are probably original to the house. A little side note, oftentimes switches will never go bad. You really actually are replacing them because they're out of fashion or out of style. Most switches are rated for literally hundreds of thousands of actuations. The other reason you might replace it is because maybe you broke it because you or your kids were having some shenanigans.
How did you get this?
You shattered it. Not only did you hit the
Well,
light switch,
that's a
you
wrap.
shattered it.
That's not something that props can fix.
Flatheads are sometimes a little bit harder to get out, and it's just because they want to slip. It's one of the reasons why Phillips head screws made their mark, was it was less likely for the head to slip out of it because it had more contact points. So that's why the newer ones will almost always use Phillips head. Now it looks like these are all old enough that none of them use Phillips heads. I'm seeing flatheads across the board on this. So we got a couple things going on in here. This is our light switch. This is our exhaust fan switch. And it looks like they're wired up to the same power coming in. So some switches will have a neutral, some will have a ground, some will have multiple ports on them. You just want to make note of which one is which. They generally will work even if stuff's reversed. Nope. What the heck is going on? All right, it took me a second to try to figure out what's actually happening in this box. Normally, you will have power coming from either the circuit breaker box or the previous outlet or whatever part of the chain of lights. But it looks like the power is actually going to the light source at the ceiling, and then it's being routed down here to the switch. Sometimes you get things that are just done differently or weirdly. The easiest thing is just to simply swap these switches out. If you want to understand what's happening, you can kind of look into it a little bit closer and find that some stuff is done kind of differently. It's not necessarily wrong, it's just sometimes it's a little different and quirky. But in this case, it's just easy for us to just swap out these switches, which is what we're trying to do today. I went to Home Depot, but you can go to any hardware store. I picked up a couple new switches. There are a lot of options at the home improvement stores, so just be aware as you're looking through those what you're looking at. You don't necessarily need the greatest, most expensive things out there. In this case, these are the kind of the cheapest Decora style switches. Now if we look at these, they look pretty similar to the ones we're taking out, except they do have a ground on them. The fact that there's no ground cable going to this is not the end of the world. There was some different practices in the early 80s, but this just can be a direct swap. Now, these are plugged into the back of the switch, and it's basically a press connection with a little tooth in there that when the wire goes in, it kind of grabs onto it so it doesn't pull back out. Depending on who you talk to, this is maybe not the best way to do it. It also, to get them out, you would have to like stick a screwdriver in there to pull it out. In this case, because I'm going to do things a little bit differently, a little more strong by using these posts on the sides. And we're just going to double check if there's any kind of mark or indication about direction. There's not. So we're going to cut these off. These are your wire strippers. The numbers on the wire stripper have to do with the gauge of the wire. In this case, I'm pretty sure we're 14 gauge wire. So I'll find the 14 on here. I'm going to do about a 1/2 inch or so of insulation to pull it off. And what you do is you just basically put it in there, cut it, twist a little bit to kind of cut all the way around it, and then it should pull off like that. About 1/2, 3/8 of an inch, something like that. And we're gonna turn it and then pull it off. Now, to help us loop it on this a little bit better, we're gonna use the little hole that's in the wire stripper, and we're just gonna turn it slightly to help us get a little more purchase on the new switch. Now let's grab that new switch. Let's see if we can get it in there. There it goes. And we'll screw that screw down. And then we're nice and tight on there. Perfect. All right, let's do this other side. If we can get it on there. It's a little tight in here. And sometimes you won't have a lot of extra wire to work with, so you might even be more cramped than I am, and I'm trying to do this to where you can see it on camera. All right, let's make sure, again, we're in there nicely, good connection on everything. All right, good and tight. And then we're gonna tug on those just to make sure it's not moving. Now, this does have some text on the bottom of it, so I can tell which direction's up. But if you're ever confused, there usually should be some indication on it which direction is up or on in this case. All right, now before I put those back in, I'm gonna go ahead and do this side. Same procedure. Now, normally you're not gonna have stuff sticking out as much as I did, but I was trying to show you guys what was happening in this box. But you just kind of want to push the stuff back in. Make sure it's okay if the wires kind of S-shape back on themselves. That's okay, that's not a big deal. You just kind of want to kind of push them in until they're roughly in the spot they're going to need to be. This one's running into something. And then you want to kind of start setting your screws where they're going to want to go. And because there's all these wires in here, sometimes it's going to want to push itself back out. Let's go ahead and get this one started here on the top. Perfect. And gotta look around a little bit. There we go. Get that bottom one started. Now, in this case, oop, there it goes. It was wanting to lean a little bit like that. And so sometimes you got to finagle it. Now, you don't want to tighten them down all the way until you have them both in. And even then, right away, you're not going to want to tighten it down all the way. So just get it to catch on there. Get the bottom screw in. You will feel it fighting. I can feel it fighting right now, which is just the wires bumping into each other back there. So now you're going to get it close to being all the way in. You don't want it all the way down though, because we need to make sure we can align our plate. Now let's open up this plate. Make sure we don't lose the screws. There we go. Okay. Now this is why we don't tighten it down all the way, because look, we didn't quite line up. So I'm going to use this to kind of move those switches around and make sure they're lined up properly. Now I'm going to tighten them and just make sure they don't move. Sometimes they will still move a little bit. So just, if you have to go back and do it again just to double check, then go ahead and do that. Now, if you feel like one of your switches, like I feel like this one's leaning that direction, just give it a little tug, wiggle it a little bit. As you tighten it, hopefully it will straighten up, but I've done enough of these to know that that's not always the case. Depends on how well that electrical box was installed, how many times it's been worked on, all that kind of stuff. So let's check that again, make sure it's lining up. Real close. Perfect. Awesome. One quick tip is as you are, or when you know which breaker this is, I would suggest writing the breaker number on the inside of the plate. So that way the next time you try to maybe do some work, you can open it up and see what breaker that was. Because this was on a set of breakers labeled lights, which cover a lot of things in this house. Now the last thing you want to do to make it look like a professional actually did this is have all of your screws facing in the same direction. Don't go too tight because you can break this plate if you screw it in too tight. So screw it in just to where it's kind of catching, and then make sure all of your screw heads are facing the same direction. That's how you make it look like a professional did it. Now I'm gonna go turn on the breaker and we'll make sure this works. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. The one thing I'll say is if it's not a standard light switch, like a 3-way light switch or something like that, which I will be doing a video on that at some point, the easiest thing you can do is just take the wire from the old switch and put it into the new switch. That's the best thing you can do. Anyway, I hope this video gives you the confidence to fix or replace, update your basic light switches in your home. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.